The time is 12:30, so this is our daily broadcast that we're starting. Also, during this time, we like to give some of our bears an enrichment item. So you might notice that we have Tasha Bear up here in front of the large viewing windows. If you'd like to see her up on the viewing deck, you can come up here as well. But this broadcast does go live on our website, bear.org, if you ever want to tune in and you're not able to make it to the Bear Center. Now, you'll notice that today, Tasha got what we call the donut. What we do is we just fill it with some treats down in those little holes that are drilled into the donut. So a lot of times they'll get things like peanuts, hazelnuts, Brazil nuts, maybe some fruits like grapes in there. Those are a lot of their favorites, at least. So this basically encourages our bears to kind of maneuver the enrichment item and put their mind to work a little bit, kind of like a puzzle. You may notice that Tasha is able to pick up those treats with her tongue very delicately. Bears do kind of have a little bit of a sticky tongue. It also is a very long tongue, so they can also reach down into logs or the enrichment toys like we have here. This makes them a very selective feeder. So you'll notice that sometimes on our behind-the-scene tours, they're able to pick up peanuts and other treats without getting their mouths all full of dirt or sand. You may also see some of our bears foraging here out in this enclosure. Our enclosure here is about 2.5 acres, and our bears do have some wild foraging opportunities that they can take advantage of. A lot of our bears like to graze on some of these succulent grasses and clovers quite a bit. They also have some raspberry bushes, hazelnut shrubs, things along those lines that they can help themselves to if they like. But our bears do know that they get food. They often get breakfast and supper delivered right to their doorstep. Now, we are coming up into fall here pretty soon, so our bears are going to be going through a stage of their yearly life cycle called hyperphagia. All that means is that these bears are trying to put on as much weight as they can for hibernation, because up here in northern Minnesota and throughout a lot of the state, the bears are actually in hibernation for about 7 months of the year. So, if you can imagine, they only have 5 months of the year to eat as much as they can, because while they're in hibernation, the bears actually don't eat anything. They might eat a little bit of snow, but they don't actively go search for water or food. If you did make it out on one of our behind-the-scene tours today, you might have seen how some of our bears eat peanuts. So a cool adaptation that the bears have to forage, once again, is something called a diastema. So if you did go on those behind-the-scene tours, you might see that the bears get to crack those peanut shells open with their mouth, and then they spit the shell out the side. This diastema is just a gap in their tooth line. It's right behind their canines and in front of their molars. They not only use that for nuts, they will also use this for various shrubs like the raspberries I mentioned before. All the bear does is it'll kind of string the stem of the raspberry bush through that gap in their teeth, and then they'll kind of pull all them off in one swipe. This actually is really efficient. Like I mentioned, they're trying to eat as much as they can in these 5 months that they have. But it not only, once again, is efficient, it is actually pretty good for the plant's health. When they do strip off berry bushes like raspberries or choke cherries, things along those lines, they don't actually damage the stem or the leaves. That leaves it intact, and it will help the plant grow back better next year. So we do also have Holly out in this 2.5 enclosure. She's probably working on a den right now. She's not too interested in this enrichment item right now, but she can make her way up front if she wants to. But most of the time, Holly likes to, like I mentioned, hang out and work on her den around this time of the year. Tasha Bear here. She actually gave us a really cool opportunity last year to see her hibernate and watch how she prepares for that. She actually denned in this rock den that you might see up front. So she gave all of us a really good opportunity to learn and watch how she hibernates. We do provide our bears with some leaves, maybe some straw if they want to use that as bedding in their dens. But a lot of times the bears will gather natural materials as well. They can rip out grass, they'll bite bark off of trees and rake up any dead leaves that they can. Maybe they'll take off some branches off of balsam trees, anything that can kind of separate them from the cold ground. Another thing that you might notice about our bears is they have pretty thick coats. When they are in hibernation, that coat is actually so thick that if the snow were to fall on them, it doesn't melt like it does on our skin. So that helps them keep them a little bit warmer. Another cool thing about bears and their ability to find food is that they actually have a really good sense of smell. It's probably one of their best senses. We say that it's about 7 times greater than that of a bloodhound. So all of our bears know where most of the food is when we throw it, and they know where most of the berry bushes are around in their enclosure. So their other senses are also pretty good. Their eyesight, they are nearsighted and they can see in color. I think they can see up to about 200 yards away. Another cool adaptation that black bears have is you might notice while Natasha's maneuvering that donut around, she has really curved claws. Those are actually give them the ability to climb trees really well and also rip open any logs or flip over rocks to be able to get at maybe ant larvae, wasp larvae, and also, like I said, climb those trees to get at those foraging opportunities or evade predators. Now today, it's a pretty cool day outside. It's pretty overcast. There's not a lot of sun. But as you can see, our bears wear a thick winter coat that is black all year long. So they do often have to cool off on hotter days. Like I said, today is not too bad. So most of our bears are probably just panting. They can't sweat like humans, but they do lose some of that moisture through their tongues and their mouths like dogs. Another thing that we'll see our bears do quite frequently is take a dip in the pond that we have. We encourage them to go in there sometimes by throwing apples in there so they can do a little bit of apple bobbing. But when they do dip in the ponds, they are cooling off via kind of dipping their faces, dipping their foot pads in the water to get to those areas that usually lose heat the most. And their coat is actually pretty specially adapted. It's actually, they can hold quite a bit of water in their coat. So the guard hairs that they have, the outermost hairs, are pretty close together, so that allows them to hold on to that water after they dip in, let's say, a lake or a pond like ours, and then that'll cool them off for longer. You may also notice that we have a bunch of extra critters here at the Bear Center. We have quite a few red squirrels, chipmunks, blue jays, gray jays. All of these critters kind of know that there's food here all the time. So they take advantage when they can. Our bears aren't usually too bothered by them, but sometimes they do get annoyed because they are stealing their food. So occasionally they will swat at some of the squirrels and chipmunks. Not going to lie, sometimes they end up in a fatality every now and then, but our bears don't really care to eat those squirrels or chipmunks because their diet is actually only about 10% animal protein. The other 90% is plant vegetation, so those things like fruits, nuts, berries, like I mentioned, is usually what takes up most of that 90%. Looks like Tasha's over at the stand-up feeder. So once again, you can see her inside in front of the viewing windows if you'd like. That's a pretty good shot close up, but if you're up on the viewing deck, you can kind of look down and see her foraging as well. We do have a couple of trolley feeders outside here. You may notice that they're strung between the deck and a couple of the trees. And we have some platforms that we put treats on. Some of our bears are more apt to climb than others. I've always seen Holly and Lucky. They're usually the climbers here. They'll just kind of hike themselves up in the tree, pour that little platform out into their mouth, and then climb back down. It's not always the most graceful, but they do the job just fine. And you can see Tasha's kind of making her way back into the woods over there. Once she knows that she got all the treats out here that she can, usually they kind of mosey off into our 2.5 acres here. She might make her way back around quite frequently when Holly and Tasha are out together. You'll see them chase each other around the pond here or just around in the woods occasionally, which is always fun to watch. Holly does like to chase Tasha around because she is the matriarch here. Black bears live in a matriarchal system, so that just means that the females are in charge. We like to joke around and say that Holly rules with an iron paw around here because she does chase some of the bears around and remind them that she is the one that is in charge. So it looks like Tasha made her way out of sight now, as is Holly. Holly never came up to greet us, but they are out in this 2.5 acres for a good portion of the day. So if they do make their way back up, we will make an announcement that they are visible in the windows or up on the deck, just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to see them. But we do have another behind-the-scenes tour coming out at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock. We'll make another announcement when that comes around. But I want to thank you all for coming here to the Bear Center, or for those of you who are tuning in online. We really appreciate everyone's support, and we're really glad that you were able to join us here for the broadcast. I forgot to mention, my name is Natasha. I am the naturalist here at the Bear Center. Just recently got hired on, and I was an intern here last fall. So if I sound familiar to anybody, that's where you know me. But once again, thank you to everybody for tuning in.